All right, hello everybody. My name is Cam Battley, and I am the Chief Corporate Officer of Aurora Cannabis, and I'm delighted to be here at CannaTech in Cape Town, if for no other reason that I have never heard about radioactive hemp before, and I'm very excited to have heard that. You learn something new in this business every day. So we're talking about the global cannabis investment climate. By a show of hands, how many people own any cannabis stocks? All right. Those of you who own cannabis stocks, that would include me. I'm a shareholder of Aurora and actually some other cannabis companies as well. You will know that 2019 has not been a fun year. It has not been fun. But it's been important. And I want you to look past the volatility in the stocks. And we've seen volatility, not like the 40 to 80% come downs in some cannabis stocks this year. We haven't seen that degree of volatility before. But we've seen volatility consistently in this sector since the very beginning, since its inception. Since the first companies were publicly listed in Canada, and now we've got them in a few other countries, including the US and Australia. So volatility is to be expected for a while, and that's not dismaying. When you're inventing a new industry, which is what we're doing, we're literally involved in inventing a new global industry in real time. You are going to see these ups and downs. They are to be expected, but we need to learn from them as well, and we need to be prepared for certain developments. Now, you take a look at the beginning of any new industry, from automotive over a century ago to tech companies much more recently. And what you will see is a very large number of companies get into the business at the beginning. Lots of people want to participate in a new industry, especially one as promising as cannabis, where everyone agrees, everyone, from governments to analysts to investors and operators, we all agree that this is going to be a massive global market. Analysts in the US typically predict that this sector will be worth tens of billions of dollars a year in perhaps 3 or 4 years. And much bigger than that afterwards. So we know, no matter how great the anticipation is, no matter how much interest, that there will be a lot of companies that come into a new sector. The question to which we need to direct our minds, and those of us who operate in the sector need to scenario plan for and certainly strategize for, is how many companies come out the other side. If we have, in Canada alone, well over 200 companies licensed to produce cannabis in Canada, and something over 60 public companies. Then add on the US companies and the companies in other countries, including Israel and elsewhere, that want to participate in this industry. Realistically, how many do we think will actually survive? I think we can all agree it's a smaller number than 200. What we're seeing happen right now, and why, for one reason, 2019 has been an important year, is that we are seeing the beginning of a winnowing process where we can start to catch a glimpse of the companies that will come out the other side, that will be long-term survivors, long-term thrivers. So what are some of the characteristics of those companies? Well, the company that I worked for before I came to Aurora is Canopy. And until very recently, they were the world's largest producer and seller of cannabis. For the last 2 quarters, would anybody like to guess who is now the largest producer and seller of cannabis? Thank you. Canopy is a company that has made an arrangement with Constellation Brands, a global brewer and distiller and winemaker. And that arrangement brought them a very large amount of capital, about $4 billion US worth of capital. But then again, there are pluses and minuses to every strategy. And their strategy, I think, is likely to be effective. I think Constellation will continue to be a major player for years to come in the cannabis business. But what did that mean to Canopy? Well, I was having lunch a couple months ago with my former boss, Bruce Linton, who until recently was the CEO of Canopy. And he didn't have control over his own destiny, ultimately, did he? And that's to be expected, and he knew it at the time. When you take that much capital, which he said is a deal that he would have to make 7 days a week, and I understand that, it meant giving away control of the destiny of Canopy. It meant giving up control of the board. So the majority of board members belong to Constellation. And it meant having a chief financial officer from Constellation appointed to Canopy. And it meant that, while today, about 38% of Canopy stock is owned by Constellation, there's a clear path to majority ownership. That's a strategy, and it's a legitimate one. At the beginning of a new industry, it is very hard, and I would even say presumptuous of us to assume that there's only one strategy that is going to work for the long-term survivors. Now, that said, Canopy and Kronos, with their deal with Altria, which is very much the same, they've taken one strategy. Aurora has always taken its own way. And our strategy is different. And that is to maintain independence. We are absolutely going to do the right deals with companies in mature industries in different parts of the world. And those discussions are underway. It's one of the reasons why I'm never home. Before coming here, just over the last few months, I've been in the UK and Australia and Thailand and Latin America and Germany and France, and the list goes on and on and on. The work doesn't stop. It's 7 days a week, and by the end of the year, I will have traveled about 500,000 miles. So much so that my green guilt has been gnawing at me, and I'm buying carbon offsets, I want you to know. That is what has to be done to open up the world. And our strategy at Aurora is different, and that is to open up the world, and to do so in a smart and sustainable way. Among the conversations that we're having, my colleagues and I from Aurora here, is with policymakers and regulators, what we do around the world to help guide them according to the best practices of other jurisdictions that have had medical cannabis systems in place for some time. Canada is the first and most obvious example, but Germany, too, has a lot to say for it. They don't have as many patients as Canada. Canada has something like 400,000, over 1% of the population, with a script from their doctor for medical cannabis. Thus far, you'd have to say it's the most successful, smoothly operating, well-regulated cannabis system in the world, but it's not perfect. We don't have widespread reimbursement for medical cannabis patients, and that is something worth fighting for. Germany does. 2/3 of German patients are receiving insurance reimbursement for their medical cannabis, and that's appropriate. That's right. Part of our mission, which goes beyond corporate strategy and self-interest, part of our mission that animates us is to do good for patients on a global basis and to urge systems to evolve, to learn from the best practices everywhere in the world. Australia is another example. When I went to Australia for the first time a little more than a year ago, they had had a medical system in place for about 2 years. They had fewer than 1,000 patients in that system. That's what I call a theoretical medical system. That's a disease afflicting the United Kingdom right now, where they've got a medical system in place, but there are only a few dozen patients, and they throw up roadblock after roadblock, essentially to frustrate the lives of medical cannabis patients, or people who want access to medical cannabis and need access to medical cannabis. What did Australia do? Well, we worked together with them, and they got smart. And they realized that there's no point in having a theoretical medical cannabis system. So what they did was they removed a couple of really important blockages. The requirement that only a specialist can write a script for medical cannabis. the requirement for 2 paper-based approval systems for registration of patients on a federal level and a state level. That's what was holding things back. Now what's happened? A year ago, 1,000 patients. Now they've surpassed 20,000 patients. It's looking like Canada did 4 years ago. Who's benefiting? The patients are the first and biggest beneficiaries. The people with chronic pain, with chemotherapy-induced nausea, with anxiety disorders, with bowel disease, with fibromyalgia, you name it. They're the first beneficiaries. But they're not the only ones. As these medical cannabis systems grow, and as quality producers who are committed to producing cannabis as medicine thrive, investors do well as well. Now, Aurora, I've mentioned to you that we take our own way. It's visible in everything we do. Our strategy of cultivation is like nobody else's. Every single one of our competitors that produces cannabis at scale is doing so in retrofitted greenhouses in Canada, in the US. Some of us, including Aurora, are experimenting with outdoor grow as well. But Aurora has done something unique that I am very, very proud of. We have pioneered the cultivation of cannabis at mass scale in huge indoor facilities with a glass roof, with 100% control over all the critical environmental variables. We pioneered this with our flagship facility called Aurora Sky, located at Edmonton International Airport. It's 800,000 square feet. Its nameplate production capacity is 100,000 kilograms of cannabis per year. And I'm happy to say we're blowing right past that. It's doing better than anticipated. The yields are better. And this facility is the most advanced agricultural facility of any kind anywhere in the world, and we invented this concept. Nobody else has done that. And they questioned it. Other companies tried to throw rocks at us, saying, why don't you do what everybody else has done? It's quicker, it's easier, it's cheaper to retrofit a greenhouse. Well, maybe not. Because those greenhouses are not producing cannabis of the quality that we produce in our perfectly controlled conditions. We don't have crop loss. Companies growing in greenhouses have crop loss. We have greater predictability. We have higher quality. And something else, my friends, we have way lower cost. Our facilities are designed without compromise to deliver mass scale, high quality, beautiful bud, at the lowest cost among our peers. And in our last quarter, which had some yellow indicators as well as mostly green, one of the things that really stood out for me is that our cost to produce a gram of that incredibly high quality cannabis came down below $1. We came in at 85 cents. Now, what we're talking about before, sustainability. Which companies are going to survive? If you want to predict right now what's going to happen in the investment environment in 2020, one of the things to look for is which companies are actually going to be able to make money selling cannabis, whether it be medical or consumer. And we're happy with both. We define ourselves as primarily a medical cannabis company. We were founded on that basis. We operate on that basis to that level of quality. But we also happen to have the largest market share in Canada's consumer system. And that surprised a lot of people, that we came out of the gate faster than everybody else, including companies that I think were anticipated to have a lot of inventory and ready to go. But who's got the largest market share? It's Aurora. And I think that one of the things that we've learned is that quality wins. Consumers are discriminating in the Canadian consumer system based on quality. They'll pay a little bit more for one of our strains, for one of our derivative products, than they will for somebody else's. A little bit more. There's price sensitivity too, but that's good. But the other thing, the other datum that really jumped out in our last quarter, as difficult as it was with our sales down 24% QOQ, after umpteen quarters of consistent, significant growth, We think it's temporary headwinds. We know what the problems are, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that jumped out, and one of the things that you want to look for, is gross margin. If you are an investor in cannabis companies, you cannot avoid looking at gross margin. And one of the things that makes me incredibly proud and tells me that we have validated our business strategy is that we are consistently delivering the highest gross margin in this industry. 58% in the last 2 quarters. Why does that matter? Well, we're in the cannabis business. We got to make money selling cannabis. And when I see some of our peers delivering gross margin numbers that are very anemic, and in one particular case recently, actually negative, that's something to worry about. And more broadly, one of the reasons why we can expect, I think, over the next 12 to 24 months, a real winnowing in the companies that will be around in the future. We'll see a reduction in the number of companies. Why? Because most cannabis companies can't produce cannabis for less than about $3.50 or $4 a gram. If you can't do that, you can't make it. You can't make enough money selling cannabis. And we've even heard some people predicting that there will be price compression as additional supply hits the Canadian market. And after Canada, because Canada is really the test case for the world, isn't it? After Canada, we'll see the same model play out. But if there is price compression in the Canadian consumer market as purchasing power increases among provincial buyers, which companies are going to survive? The ones that can produce at low cost and sell for a premium price. So there's a good gap and a good gross margin. It's basic economics. This is what we need to pay attention to. 2019 was not a banner year for cannabis stocks. In Canada, in the US, there was a lot of enthusiasm. There was a phrase used during the dot-com era, irrational exuberance. That's something that is natural, that does happen in brand new industries where everybody thinks it's a gold rush. But there is that winnowing that happens in every sector, in every industry, that is happening right now. And it will start with a number of indicators. Some companies will find it impossible to continue to access capital, or at least access capital at reasonable cost. Some companies will not be able to compete on the shelves where the consumers are making the decisions in Canada and then subsequently in other markets that legalize for consumer use. Some companies don't have the credibility to go from country to country and meet with regulators and meet with policymakers and line up partners. They don't have that credibility. It hasn't been earned. That is the ethic behind Aurora's strategy. Produce at low cost, produce high quality, produce products that both patients and consumers want. Try very, very hard to keep all our promises to our partners. Don't worry too much about the volatility in the sector, as much as it pains me. And I'm the one who has to speak to our shareholders who go, I'm down 40% for the year. What's up? That's a hard conversation to have. But it has to be done. And we have to educate people, sometimes one-on-one, and sometimes in forums like this. And remind them that if they believed in the differentiated strategy of Aurora or another company that they love, and God bless them if they got another one, if they believed in it, and they continue to believe in the strategy, understand that the stocks will be volatile. They'll continue to move. But as we start to pick the winners in this sector, some will rise. Others will disappear. Some will be consolidated. Some will be purchased. Sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Others will simply go out of business. And it's a sad fact. It's part of the difficult and carnivorous and red in tooth and claw nature of capitalism. But these are the disciplines that we apply ourselves to when we enter public markets. And so we have to be ready for the tough days as well as the triumphant days. And one of the things that I've insisted that Aurora never do is don't tout our stock when it's up. Don't cry hot tears when it's down. Keep the focus on consistent, disciplined execution. And if we believe in our strategy, and I can tell you across our company we do, we will come out the other side and we will be among the survivors. And we will be around in 5 and 10 and 20 years. And what's the industry going to look like long term? My own prediction is that the cannabis sector will look a lot like the global brewing industry, with a handful of global powerhouses and some regional champions in different parts of the world, and a whole lot of, in some cases, really talented craft producers. And then, of course, all the ancillary industries, extractors and technical companies. We are partnered with a lot of them, some of the best. One of the ones that really lights my fire is a company called CTT Pharmaceuticals that has partnered with us to deliver a great, unique product form. It's a sublingual strip. You stick it under your tongue, it dissolves in a minute, and it has rapid bioavailability and therefore onset of action. It's a great product, and there are companies out there that are going to be winners all around, beyond the big producers. So, is it going to be an exciting next 12 and 24 months? Yes. Is it going to be stressful sometimes? Yes, it will. But I wouldn't miss it for the world, because let me tell you, I spent my whole career before this in the global biopharmaceutical industry, and that was fascinating, and I felt like I was making a contribution. But I have never done work that was as exciting, as demanding, and as fulfilling as the work I'm doing right now, inventing this new industry together with my colleagues at Aurora and other companies, and working with people around the world, from patients and stakeholders and investors. It's fascinating, it's exciting. And the sense of mission about what we're doing, whether it be bringing new medical alternatives to patients who've been suffering for too long and who haven't been able to receive sufficient relief from traditional pharmaceuticals, whether it's that, or whether it's having those conversations, starting in Canada and wherever appropriate in other countries as well, about consumer legalization. Taking away not just the stigma, but the pain suffered by people around the world who have been charged or convicted with nonviolent cannabis possession offenses, one of our advocacy priorities that we fight for in Canada and elsewhere. Those people who have been affected by cannabis prohibition in country after country are overwhelmingly the most vulnerable members of society. People of color, in Canada, Indigenous Canadians, low-income people. It's not middle-aged white guys like me. So there's a mission to achieve for patients, for consumers, for social justice. It's an opportunity for somebody like me to make a mid-life career change into something that delivers a sense of mission, something I can believe in. And I can tell you that I speak for every one of our 3,300 employees around the world when I say that.